partly, I think it's a bit of an interest to semantic media wiki people involved in that, because I think it's important, and that's already the summarization of my talk, to follow standards. And that's one of the key aspects when I go into enterprises and try to pursue on topics like that and try to sell the semantic web, what I've been doing for over 10 years now. It was a really hard job until, I would say, 3 years ago. Now it has arrived. Semantic web is in the enterprises, not everywhere, but in certain countries I can see a very high uptake of that kind of technologies. But of course there's still a lot of questions around enterprise linked data. And that's what I'm going to talk about now in the next 35 minutes. I will start with a very brief introduction. Thank you very much for what you've already said, but a few words in addition to that. We were founded back in 2001, actually. Semantic Web Company is based in Vienna. In 2004, we started with the Semantic Web School, which was really dedicated to this new kind of technology. Honestly, I didn't have a lot of knowledge at that time about the semantic web, so it was good to have some experts coming to Vienna to give trainings for our customers. So I've learned a lot from them at that time, what they really need, what they deserve, why semantic technology is important to them, and I've also found out that there was a lot of confusion, which is still around. So most people thought the semantic web is about collaboration only, so it was more this Web 2.0 movement starting at that time also, and then others were very concentrated on the idea of vocabulary management only, and so I think it was also one of the reasons the W3C now is more talking about linked data instead of the semantic web. In any case, it developed quite nicely, and in 2009 we decided to come to market with our own product, because we've seen at that time there was some tools around. Most of them were just too complicated or not enterprise ready. That was, we thought there is a gap somehow, and we tried to fill in. And with Pool Party we managed to attract quite a lot of customers on 3 continents. We are very proud of that. And now we are in version 4.5. And we've, of course, built in a lot of features, and we're now in the situation we really have to take care about that it's not becoming too featureitis. If you have too many features, it's also not that good. And we really always try to follow the actual requirements of the market. So that's what we are really after. We listen to our customers and try to find out, okay, what they really need when they create knowledge graphs. So we are in several industries. So as you know, this topic is not really something which is only interesting for government or for the financial industry or for any. Actually, it's always about distributedness. Most of our customers deserve to have a better integrated views on data. Of course, the information retrieval aspect is always important, and the vocabulary aspect. If you have a lot of languages, like one example I'd like to pick out here is the Pokemon company. You know those little, I don't know, the Pokemons, and and they have a lot of different names, a lot of different interactions. So it's an ontology. Actually, the Pokemon semantic network is really complicated, and what happened to the Pokemon company was that it became more a community driven product, which means the kids started to invent their own names, their own interactions. So the product managers didn't know anymore how their products are being used. Now what they try to do again is to bring together those different developments, that the product manager can again understand how their products are really called in the different countries. They have different names and so on. So that was one of the problems you can solve with linked data. Okay, so I will start now with some frequently asked questions we constantly can hear from our clients. So that's also the agenda of my talk, more or less. It's still that, of course, at the very beginning we are asked, okay, what is linked data? Of course, what's in for us? That's a very important question. Do we have to change our whole environment and so on? So there are a lot of questions. It usually takes, I would say, 4-5 months at least, with a lot of trial of software, with a lot of talks about conceptualization around linked data, that our customers understand what they can do with it. And it's also interesting, to my opinion, that those people who first come to us have a very, very special mindset. They're the change makers somehow. They want to change something in their organizations. They're really sick of having scattered information, having these old-fashioned interfaces and stuff like that. So they're really interested in having some new technologies in place. And sometimes they are a bit alone. They're a bit alone in their companies. They try to change something, but it's hard to do that. And we really have to support them at the very beginning. After a while, after we've probably made some mock-ups or first applications, it becomes easier. So linked data is a very abstract concept. I think with the Semantic Media Wiki, it's much easier to explain because it's well integrated. There is an application already in place. You don't have to invent it anymore. The linked data aspect is more the abstract layer underneath the application. You have to make it visible. Okay, so what is linked data? To explain it to Semantic Media Wiki persons, of course, I would do it differently because you know already a lot of semantic web technologies. But what I found out is that most Semantic Media Wikis are not linked data producing sources, unfortunately. We can talk about that probably in the breaks or so, because I'm always very interested that there is more and more linked data sources coming out. So it's most Semantic Media Wikis, at least I found out, cannot be used as linked data sources, unfortunately. Also, there's just a little step here. So why is it important? I mean, of course, first I start with, if I explain it to potential customers, look, there are graphs everywhere. Most of them know, of course, what Google is doing, the knowledge graph. You have this fact box when you search for a person or a country or something at Google. You get a fact box, very similar to what you have at Semantic Media Wiki most often. And that's very first new, let's say, first step. They start to understand, okay, you get kind of an info box around things. It's also interesting to see that companies like Microsoft, I mean, Facebook is a different story, but Microsoft just recently started with introducing their own, they call it Office Graph. Pretty much the same approach. So you start to connect business objects to each other, and you stop modeling your data architecture around documents. So the document is just a visualization of the information. It's not the carrier of the information anymore. I think that's the main aspect also of linked data. If you look at other SQL databases like MarkLogic, which is became very popular in recent months, it started to be a document-oriented database, but now they put more and more graph-oriented metadata around their documents. And the combination of documents plus the knowledge graph on top, that's the way I think information should be designed. And so a linked data approach, to my opinion, is a very intuitive way to design information architectures. Also, human brains don't work like a document store or a relational database. I mean, that's clear. We have obviously graph-oriented ways of thinking in our brains. We have things, and we have no strings. Of course, we have strings and things in our brains, but all of our thinking is first of all oriented around things. I mean, that starts with most people speak at least 2 languages, so of course you have to link those knowledge graphs somehow. You don't have a separate conceptualization of a dog when you talk in English than you would have when you talk in German or in French. I hope so, at least. So that's one of the key learnings, which is, I think, quite intuitive after a couple of days when you started to think about linked data. But it's not obvious to everybody because we're very still in the ages captured when Google was completely oriented towards strings and documents. So you just type in something and I think they introduced autocomplete just 3 years ago. It's not that long that it was in place. You just put in some strings and then you get some documents. And that's how we learned how it should work. But of course, that's not the end of the story. So obviously, that's one of the first things. And if you look at typical enterprise information systems, like the ones sold in the 80s and 90s, which are all around the places still. It's amazing how the stickiness of IBM, Lotus Notes, it's amazing how often it's still used. And there's nothing about things in such stores. It's all something else, but not a knowledge graph. Okay, so, and then of course, what is a knowledge graph? Make it a bit more concrete. What could it be? Okay, here is a very small knowledge graph. Just recently there was this MTV Video Music Award on, and I think it was Miley Cyrus winning one of those, and she's probably related to another actress. In that case, I think it's Nicki Minaj. And this thing, I mean, of course it's a woman, but it's in our way of thinking, W3C would say it's a resource. But this resource, of course, can be connected to other databases. And that's the nice thing. You can open up your knowledge graph and link it to others. So it's sort of a meta collaboration. I think if you, I don't know very much about Semantic Media Wiki, but I don't know if there are really good mechanisms to link from one Semantic Media Wiki to another one. I don't know that. So there is like batch linking and you have ways to do that. Great, okay. I mean, that's about this mechanism that you can link a thing to another thing and then retrieve other facts around Nicki Minaj from Music Brains, for instance, or do a sentiment analysis over her Twitter stream. So how is her mood today? And so on. So that's how linked data works, because everything has a URI which is resolvable via HTTP. And that's the question, is Semantic Media Wiki doing the same? If so, it's a linked data source. Okay, then you have relations, you have more specific relations maybe, you have classes, you can say, okay, this is a person, this is an event, and so on. And then, of course, most of the information which is in enterprises is in text. It's unstructured, it's somewhere on the web, it's in a SharePoint, it's in a, I don't know, in a wiki like Confluence or Jive and so on. So how can we connect our knowledge graphs with our documents? How can we enrich our knowledge graph by information from the documents? And here text mining and natural language processing comes in. It was not necessarily one of the main aspects of the semantic web in the very first years, but now those communities really grew together. So if you go to a semantic web conference like Semantics in Leipzig, or which was, by the way, also the 10th time this year, this year I think a Semantic Media Wiki conference is also 10th anniversary, or there's a Semtech Biz in California, also the 10th year, by the way. Everywhere people discuss how to combine semantic web technologies and natural language processing. So that's one of the, let's say, most obvious ways to do that. You extract entities from text, some already extract facts even, or there's sentiment analysis became very popular and so on. So what you're going to do now is you extract the things by detecting strings, disambiguate, and attach them to your knowledge graph. And that's also a way how the graph can learn from the incoming information streams. And of course, for those people who are interested in search engine optimization, web publishing, and so on, schema.org became a very, very important schema. It's driven by the large search engines, mainly by Google, and there are already more than 300 million websites out there which have schema.org in it, either as RDFA or as microdata. And if you use schema.org on top of your, let's say, enterprise knowledge graph to make a schema alignment to the schema.org, then it's very nice to, with very little effort, you can publish your information, your products, not only your products. Schema.org is really very extensive, and it can be nicely indexed by Google. And that's also one aspect which is important for enterprises, of course, to make it accessible and actionable, because information, Google Actions are also something which is attached to schema.org. If it's let's say a music artwork, a song, you can put the action there and say play. If it's a shoe, you can put the action buy, and so on. So that's the next step. The search results are not documents anymore. They produce potential actions around things. And that's the next step in what Google is starting now. So, and schema.org is a precondition for that. So obviously you need to have a knowledge graph around your documents, otherwise you cannot do that. Yeah, so linked data. I think all of you know this LOD cloud. This community is very proud of. That's the recent version, by the way, which was built in 2014. It grew from the last version 3 times. It's not visible anymore. I mean, this is more or less already, to my opinion, senseless. It's just to show, oh, it's great. There's a lot of linked data out there, and it's all connected. And there was a network effect caused by the fact that the standards were used. And I think that's unique in history, that somehow we all, or a lot of organizations, agreed upon a way how to publish data on the web. And that's great, because with that, you can reuse it much easier. I mean, depending on the licenses, of course, which are put upon the data sets, and it's happening already. I know about a lot of companies using Freebase, GeoNames, or DBpedia, and you don't even recognize that. So I'm frequently asked, but who is using that? I say, you don't even know it. If you go to, I don't know, Amazon, they use it. If you go to Google, of course they use DBpedia, or they have used it to put it into their own knowledge graph. So there is a lot of action around it. Also in enterprises, I mean, many of our customers do it in their intranets already. So they have linked data sources, most often mirrored, of course, because the Spark endpoints have a very low quality of service most often, but they mirror the DBpedia and use it to create or enrich some of their application. Okay, so next question, of course, would be, okay, got it, linked data, interesting concept. Okay, why should I invest in that? How can we benefit from it? I mean, of course, we have to explain it to them. So how can enterprises benefit from it? That's a try to put it together into a structure, like a first approach, a matrix of, okay, it's a multi-stakeholder perspective on linked data. You talk to IT management, you talk to information architects, sometimes they're still called knowledge managers. And then, of course, to the people who are in the business processes and they need some clear USP why they should use linked data. So one thing, of course, is unified views on business objects. They don't have to link manually anymore all the different facts around a certain, I don't know, market, for instance, product, and so on. They have it at one place, potentially. That saves time and increases information quality. So that's somehow, I think, comprehensible. Information flows adapt to the needs of the user. I mean, that's this, you know, this personalization, contextualization debate. We had that years and years. It was more in research papers at the very beginning, and now I think there is a lot of offers in this space already. So if you look at certain providers of recommendation systems, recommender systems, they most often have knowledge graphs in the background. Some still do it more, let's say, document-oriented or a mixture of both. But the adaptation of information flows to the user needs, I think, is very important in the next step. If you work in several industries where you have a lot of incoming information, there's no other way to handle information flows like recommender systems in between. Then this business intelligence like, BI-like complex queries. There's also quite an interesting development in that direction. Question answering machines, natural language query interfaces where you just type in show me all blah blah blah. Google is doing a lot of that. If you type in, I don't know, who is the when was Bill Clinton born, you get an answer. There's no document anymore. Just say, okay, the date. Try it out. A lot of types of questions are already understood by Google. Of course, in enterprises, it's not that easy. You don't have such questions. You have more complex queries, you have more specific queries, and so on. So here you obviously need to create knowledge graphs first, which are describing your domain. And that's the big effort you have to take first. And that's, of course, one of these bottlenecks. So then they say, yeah, I understand, there are a lot of opportunities, but how can I produce such a knowledge graph? I mean, that we cannot afford that, and we have not the skills, we have not the right persons, and so on. So, of course, use cases, very important to make it even better comprehensible. We have some use cases on the web. That's always good to show to our customers, because the ones we did for, I don't know, Credit Suisse, we cannot show. Of course, we're not even allowed to talk about it. But those three are one of those examples you can try out on your own also. Of course, if you go to regalinfo./countries, you say, okay, but what's unique by that? That's just a country profile describing the activities of a country with regards to their energy efficiency and renewable energy production. The really interesting thing here is that we put together a lot of different sources like the World Bank or Eurostat or DBpedia and so on, and that's done automatically in the background. So there is an engine which crawls the data from the API, transform it into RDF, make links between the entities, put it in a virtuoso RDF store, put a Sparkle query on top of it, and visualize it. So there is some JavaScript-oriented graphs being produced dynamically and stuff like that. So that's happening in the background. And the question here is, of course, not, is that new, innovative? No, it's not. You could do it with other technologies, but it's cheaper when you do that. So it's also a cost factor. It's much cheaper because, and it produces network effects. If you come along and say, hey, we got a new data source, I don't know, Statistik Austria, maybe one day they also have an API, I don't know. Do they have one? No, I don't think so. Okay, then we could harvest their data and do the same thing, and we don't have to do again a new mapping. It's always the same procedure. So also the skills around this procedure, of course, don't have to be learned again and again and again. It's always the same. Linked data is standardized. It produces networks of data, and that's the nice thing. ERP and water is one of those examples. You can log in. The system learns from the behavior of the users. So every action is being analyzed. If you upload a CV, of course, if you produce a new blog post, whatever. And this helps the users to identify experts. Not only experts, but also every news stream is being contextualized. You can switch it on or you can switch it off. That was an important feature we were asked to build in, because not everybody wants to have this contextualization. But you can see the difference very easily. It's run by the European Commission, and it's a platform which helps to bring together people, experts in the water industry, which is a very huge industry, and European Commission or European Union fears that we fall behind the Chinese because they have a lot of uptake in that area, and one of the activities around that is such a platform. And that's the Global Building and Performance Network. They work in the field of energy efficiency. They've harvested a lot of data from different countries to make a map of energy efficiency in buildings that was not in place before. We didn't know where all this CO2 is really being produced. GPPN was able, or is now able to do that. And again, we put together all the data sets, put an RDF structure around it, an ontology and so on, and now you can do really complex queries, and there is a visualization component. You don't have to learn Sparkly anymore. You just click to put together your queries with some clicks, and then you get the report, and the Sparkly query, if you're interested in that, is also being displayed. I mean, for some of the people, it's interesting. Okay, next one. People are, of course, always, especially the IT system administrators, fear everything which is new. Now the systems are running, and now somebody comes in, and my summer holidays probably will be damaged by that. So are you going to replace my beloved systems now, which I was working 20 years for? No, you still can use your Postgres or Oracle. It's great software. We don't want to replace it. We just put an additional virtual layer on top of it, which makes the semantics of the data explicitly available. That's the knowledge graph. Of course, it's not just one single graph. It's multi-layered. You have some maybe domain-specific parts in it. You have some parts in it which connect with the document stores, also known as annotation and categorization. And you put it into a kind of a warehouse. I mean, that's the most obvious approach, the linked data warehouse approach. And then you've got this federated approach. So the federation would mean every data source has a Sparkly endpoint, and it's federated at another place. A lot of research is going on in that area. It works somehow already, but the federated approach is nothing I would sell at the moment. So we're more in this warehouse approach. That's the typical, let's say, situation right now. You have 5, 10, however, information sources, and then you integrate it somewhere on the application layer. Some really good programmer puts together a cool JavaScript, and then it's nicely integrated. But it's in the code. I mean, the whole semantics is in the code. If this person or this team, I don't know, is going to another place, then it's lost. With the semantic web approach, obviously, the integration is done on the data level, not on the application or on the legacy data level anymore. And it's explicitly available. It's standardized. You use Sparkly as a query language. And to my opinion, it has some advantages. Okay, that's the product for this whole approach. We call it Pool Party Semantic Integrator. It's based on Virtuoso Universal Server. We also have a connector to GraphDB. That's another product by a Bulgarian company. In any case, you can put together data from different sources, from the web, from your relational databases. With the Pool Party Tesoro server, you create your knowledge graphs, and then you put them together all into a large linked data warehouse. And here happens this next step where you can put those kind of applications on top of it. Yeah, then of course, people come and say, linked data semantic web, actually we've done it for 20 years. We have a huge taxonomy in place, so can we reuse that, and what's new? That's also something typical, or also this XML guys, they're hard. That's most often a large or a long discussion why RDF is not XML, but that's another story. Okay, can we reuse existing metadata? Yes, of course, and that's one point where we usually start from. Give me your Excel sheets. A lot of companies have Excel sheets to produce taxonomies or synonym rings or something. That's typically the starting point where you can start from generating a knowledge graph where all these Excel sheets are being integrated. And then when you come back to this, I don't know, I think many of you have seen this for years and years, this semantic ontology continuum, and you start with glossaries and you end up with an ontology, and somewhere in between you have to take a lot of effort. And I asked myself, okay, is that really still valid? That was in 2004 when we started with Semantic Web School. The lecturers came and put it all on and started to explain. And I think it's important to see that there are different levels. But how about linkability? I think it's very important to have means to modularize graphs. You cannot work on one large graph except your Google's knowledge graph, as far as I know, is really one large database. But in enterprises, that's not possible. You have departments and you want to digest from the outside. That's this open-closed aspect. You cannot afford to create everything on your own. You have to reuse geonames, you have to reuse Freebase or whatsoever. Or government data. I think that's also one of the biggest opportunities in the next few years. The European Commission, a lot of countries now, the Netherlands, even Austria, now produces some linked data or open data at least. So you can reuse that and you have to link it. So that's one thing. The second is it really a continuum? I mean, with the tools we have in place, is it really possible to start from a glossary and end up with an ontology, or you have 5 tools? One is for the ontology, the next one for the taxonomy. That causes a lot of effort, and of course you have to license the software and train the people. And the next one is, what do we need for text mining? Because that's one of the main applications. So can we use all these different structures for text mining? Which ones are really the ones we should use? Where should we focus when we do the work around it in terms of high quality and so on? So just a few examples, also to give you a bit of an impression how we try to solve these questions and tackle these questions. One of the main aspects really is, in practice, enterprises have Excel everywhere. It's amazing because there actually the linked data activities are happening at the moment. Everything is done manually. You export some data from here and here and here and here, put it together in an Excel sheet, and then you do this analytics around it. Because you cannot wait until your, let's say, data warehouse or business intelligence department is going to produce the report you need. Then you open up your Excel and start working there. And of course, you have built some taxonomies in your Excel sheets usually. So we were very focused on high usability of importing Excel data. It sounds crazy, but it's really one of the most important features. Another one is, of course, okay, taxonomies, are produced all over the places already. If you look at typical social software tools like Confluence, Chive, and so on, taxonomies are everywhere. But people know about the disadvantages of a taxonomy. It's not a controlled vocabulary, and in small enterprises or even large, there's not enough data to have a valid model out of it with other web platforms probably. So one of the main aspects is, okay, how can you extract such tags automatically from large document repositories? And therefore we have this corpus analysis, which tries to generate the first version of a taxonomy. Don't trust people who tell you that they can generate ontologies automatically from a text. The quality is really low. It's not an ontology, it's probably a glossary or a taxonomy, but even then you have to refine it, that's for sure. From taxonomies to ontologies was also a very important step for the development of our software. with costs, I think there was really a very important development made by W3C. That was back in 2009. The simple knowledge organization system, SCOS, really helped to attract a lot of new communities, like the librarians. They were very negative about the semantic web at the beginning. I remember when I was at the National Library in 2007 and I gave a talk and I talked about the semantic web and they said, that's low quality, we know how the world looks like and it's a collaborative effort, it cannot work. And with SCOS now, they use that. I mean, all the librarians know about SCOS and now they are linked data guys in a certain way. So start with SCOS, but go the next steps towards ontologies, because SCOS is very limited, which is good because you can start with. You can explain it to everyone. Everybody understands after, I would say, 4 hours maximum how SCOS works. You're laughing. You say 4 minutes or 4 days? Okay, but of course it's not limited to SCOS, a knowledge graph. You want to have classes of things, as I've showed you before. You want to have more specific edges between the things. You want to have properties which describe very accurate how things are related to each other, and you want to have some rules around your knowledge graph, that it's of high quality and it should be consistent. So therefore you need ontologies, and you can apply that. I mean, here you have a small example of a SCOS resource, and it's an organization you can see up here. So it's typified or classified, and that can be done in the SCOS tree. And from there on, it inherits this SCOS resource every property which is allowed for an organization or for a person and so on. Yeah, so that's also, I think, very important. And the linkability means to let enterprises link their different parts of the knowledge graphs, and that's something, again, I come to this openness and closeness aspect, which is, I would say, something which is not really completely in place, because lots of enterprises, I mean, to digest data from the outside and enrich your own content, that's clear. Every enterprise likes that, they can save money. But the other way around, why should I publish some of my data to the public cloud? So, I mean, publishers like Wolters Kluwer, that's one of our customers, they of course have some ideas around that. They live on data. So why not publishing metadata of their content, which is publicly available, and they did that. So they have several thesauri on the web now, like the Working Law Germany thesaurus, and it's linked to other, and most of all to the Eurowalk, which is another knowledge graph published by the European Publication Office, and they use that to annotate everything which is published on Eurolax. And with this mechanism now, Wolters Kluwer can enrich search results, for instance, of lawyers who use their software with publications from Eurolax. So, I mean, it's not necessary to publish their data by having such a mechanism, but they published it also and gave it away by a CC BY license, that other publishers are starting to use their knowledge graphs, because then they can redistribute and resell their content. So it's an aggregation function for them. Of course, they are big. They are the biggest in Europe, to my second biggest maybe in this area. But they're big enough to attract a lot of smaller publishers to put together content aggregations. Okay, I think I have to speed up a little bit. How to integrate linked data in my existing systems? Of course, that's a very important question. They invested a lot in different systems like SharePoint and so on, and now somebody comes and wants to sell something new, so we want to integrate. One of the obvious approaches is, of course, to annotate unstructured content with the knowledge graphs. I said that before. And therefore, we use text mining technologies And we call it power tagging. So there is power tagging for Drupal also. There is power tagging for Confluence. There's no power tagging for Semantic Media Wiki yet, but it's always the same procedure actually. And I'm pretty sure there are some plugins for Semantic Media Wiki which can do that. I mean, of course, you can use Alchemy API and OpenCalais and that kind of stuff, these typical web APIs. But for enterprises, that's not good enough. They really need their own graphs in the background. They cannot reuse the, let's say, public domain knowledge graphs. So how does it work? There are several components, several roles. In enterprises, you have to talk about who is taking the responsibility of the data quality, and the knowledge graph, of course, has to have a high quality. So one of those people who are somehow have the ability to do that are called taxonomists, at least in the United States. There is really something like a taxonomist. In Europe, there is no such word, actually. It could be an information professional, a librarian, something like that. And those people are really skilled to work on the constant development of a knowledge graph. And then, of course, you have to have APIs, RESTful APIs, not necessarily Sparkly. Not every developer wants to learn Sparkly. So a RESTful API which returns some JSON, maybe even JSON LD, which is the linked data conformant JSON, would be great. That's offered by this pool party extractor and the pool party dissolver server. And then the power tagging is most often, for instance, with SharePoint, it's a web part. With Confluence, it's an add-on, and so on. So Drupal has these modules. So it's a plug-in system, which is offered by the carrier system and which talks to the extraction API. And then it should be kind of a learning system. That's also important because this knowledge graph has to develop further and further in parallel to the content being produced. So if you think about a news company like, I don't know, ORF or ZDF, they digest a lot of incoming streams. And if they use a knowledge graph, the knowledge graph, of course, has to develop further and further. And that's those two cycles here, which are built into such a system. Where should we start? Okay, now the person is convinced, or the team, and they want to start with a project. How could we start? I think next round we really have to train some people about SCOS. It doesn't take a long time, as I've said before, and then they really can start already to convert existing data into SCOS or import Excel sheets and start working on such a knowledge graph. And then, of course, depending on the domain, on the size and scope, that takes a couple of weeks. It's not being done in 2 days. Yeah, that's just, you know, SCOS to explain how it works. Don't want to go into details here. Of course, you can visualize SCOS and also other knowledge graphs nicely. There are some visualization JavaScript libraries. We built our own, which is here on the left-hand side. There's a big discussion going around visualizing linked data. So I think finally it really arrived at those people who are knowledgeable in the visualization area. It was very abstract for a while, but now every conference and every spot you're talking about linked data is, do you have a visualizer? I mean, that's also a discussion on its own. I think it's not good to visualize linked data as a graph and you see, oh yeah, it's complex and everything is connected with each other. That's not an additional information, to my opinion. It should solve a certain information need, the visualization. And of course, this visualization is only good for a very certain application, not the universal solution for visualizing a knowledge graph. Then, of course, it's good to produce typical web media out of linked data. That's possible, of course. I mean, it's nothing which is just working behind the scenes. You can, on a linked data graph, you can easily put a wiki on top of it. So that's one of the pool party components. There's a wiki component. You can work collaboratively on the knowledge graph. And collaboration is of course a very important factor. It's not being done by one person to create the knowledge graph. That would be a hell of a work. Yeah, so, and that's the steps. Generate this cost taxonomy, extend it, curate it, extend the costs with schemas, use existing ontologies like FOAF, Dublin Core, schema.org, and then link and map and enrich the graph with already existing ones. So that's this approach, I believe, became more or less as the valid methodology to create enterprise knowledge graphs. I mean, there are others. Some say you have to start with the ontology first. I don't think so. But that's a discussion on its own. Yeah, and then, of course, take a look on the market. What can you reuse? Interesting, I mean, there are a lot of government organizations, NGOs producing SCOS. But also interesting is WANT Taxonomies. That's a company which is in the field for over 20 years. And now finally they also found, they have a lot of business taxonomies, like for car industry, insurance industry, and so on. But they also now switched over, not switched over, but have, in addition to other ways to use taxonomists, costs integrated. So you can buy taxonomies from them and can use it as a cost graph and start on top of that. Just one example. Yeah, and then at that point the work is already going on, and first applications are probably produced. The low-hanging fruit always is to make search better, to have an autocomplete functionality, to have a query expansion in the background which uses all the synonyms, and that's usually where companies start with. And then the more and more they've worked with linked data, they find out it's not about search only. It's much more than that. It's about knowledge discovery. It's about putting together the pieces of knowledge to solve more complex problems we have in several domains. Like, think of Ebola. I think if we had some more infrastructure around, I mean, we have that pharma industry is using a lot linked data already. But again, I think my hypothesis is that most knowledge we should have to solve big problems in our days is already on planet Earth, but it's distributed, it's not connected yet. Those people who should work together on such problems haven't found each other yet. And to my opinion, this linked data effort or the semantic web is kind of a meta collaboration layer. So what's done with a semantic media wiki per application is done with the semantic web on a meta level. And since now I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of semantic media wiki people, I'd like to invite you to take that serious. As I've said in the very beginning, I think semantic media wiki is not completely standard conformant yet. There's not many sparkly endpoints around, or maybe I'm wrong. If you look at this RDF export, it's sometimes not exactly what it should be. And that would be an interesting discussion for me also to hear why is that, or maybe I'm just wrong and I don't know it. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was interesting.
The thing is on our side, I'm quite sure that there will be questions, remarks, or discussion. Who wants to make a start? I can't believe this. What is your, well, you focus, oh, sorry.
So what do you think about the new W3C linked data platform standard?
It's a bit weak at the moment. Still, it's very high level. So if you really want to design a linked data platform on top of this kind of standards, it describes 1% of what you should do. It's an important aspect, but it's not enough. I hope it will develop further, but I'm not sure to standardize the semantic web on that level. I'm very more. I think it's more. It should be more about the data which should be standardized, and not so much about how to develop software around the data. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to think about it, but I'm wondering if there are any linked data platforms on a more basic level, like databases, just one level atop.
Yeah. It was developed by IBM. As it's a marketing tool for them, to my opinion. Is somebody here from IBM? I don't think they really like linked data a lot, because it would replace at the end a little bit of their infrastructure, and they just pulled out something to say, hey, we know how linked data works. That's my personal opinion. It's not the official one.
Any further questions from that side?
Hello. So if you effectively build a system that links all the corporate databases up within an organisation, what does the front end then look like? I mean, we're talking about a free text search or some kind of category system that you can navigate.
It's really manifold, I would say. Let me think. It could be, okay, I go to Drupal, full party biz. There are a couple of examples here. Here is this visualizer. It's the Eurowalk, you know, from European Union. It's just a visualization. Okay, you can drill in here, like economics, statistics, and so on. You could link it now to a search engine. You could link it to a landing page. That's also something like BBC is working a lot with linked data, because they put together information streams around things. Just recently BBC/things was published, and you don't, as an end user, you don't find out that there is linked data in the background. It's just more dense. Information becomes dense. I don't know if that's the right word. You're a native speaker, right? In English. It's not loosely coupled anymore. You have the feeling that everything you need to know about a certain animal is there, and you won't forget anything which is important. Or if you work in the customer care for any industry, whatever it is, you know, okay, everything the company knows around this customer, its needs, its history is there. It's not in this, in that database or application anymore. And then, I mean, typically you have something like that. That's the Sonar web mining component. We again use Eurowalk here. We have several news streams like BBC, Euronews, or Nelly Crow's blog. And then you can drill down. So typically a faceted search is something you would offer on top of a knowledge graph. Maybe something like similarity search. So you found something, a follower Friday for the next commission. And then you find similar stuff maybe from BBC News and so on. So content recommendation, a widget which is produced dynamically because of the content you've written. So you don't necessarily see the semantic web. It's working in the background, linking stuff to each other. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I have a question regarding your title of the speech, which was open or closed.
Mm-hmm.
So which part of the software you use, the pool party, is open and which part is closed?
For instance, open is the modules for Drupal. We have a WordPress plugin and so on. So that's open. And of course, a lot of data being produced with pool party is open. This openness, I'm particularly interested in open data. I'm not a huge evangelist around open source software, to be honest, because with enterprises it doesn't work, honestly. Of course, we built in Apache components. That's everybody does. I mean, so we are happy to do that, and it's clear. But the software, like the pool party components I just described before, is closed source. It's a commercial software. So again, the data, a lot of clients, like for instance, Education Services Australia or the Geological Survey in Austria, they produce open data, linked open data by using pool party. And this aspect is, to me, more interesting. Data-driven economies, data-driven applications. The software itself, it's a long debate. What do you think? You would like to have pool party as open source, or?
Well, I think software is not neglectable. The whole thing about data analysis, data visualization, data interpretation, I think it's a very important part, piece of puzzle within the whole data and digital area. I mean,
more and more, already about 50% of our clients don't install the software on premises. They use it as a cloud service. So we have high availability services set up and provided to them. That can't be free. I mean, that's obvious. So anyway, it's going more and more into that direction, cloud services. And I haven't seen any valid and sustainable model around services which are free. Everybody's using freemium services. So at the beginning it's free, and then at the end you have to pay a lot of money. And I don't know if that's part of a government or should be governmental infrastructure. I mean, one of the options would be that our government is providing such services for free, although we have to pay a lot of taxes. So, it's another discussion.
But when governments invest into software development, wouldn't you agree that it makes sense that this software paid by taxpayers is also available as open source?
No, I say the data should be open.
Why not the software?
Because the software is crucial to being built around services, and services are time and material. And I want to get paid for my time. I don't want to work for free for anybody.
But you get paid by government agencies for building the software. Why shouldn't it be?
Yeah, but if you build it once for the government and then it's free for everybody, it has a different quality as you were making a product out of it. A product is really something completely else. I know that because our company started in 1998, building an open source CMS. That was our business model at that time, and it didn't work really. I mean, we made some mistakes, we learned from it, and then we switched over to the idea of making a product, and that's really a complete different workflow around the software development. And it's hard in that area, it's very hard to build a business model out of it because there's not thousands of companies using that. It's not possible to make free software out of it. But that's a long discussion.
Yeah, I also think so, and I also think that this discussion probably better fits in the coffee break. Allow me another question with the...
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I had a question. Go ahead. Hello, I was wondering a little bit about sources, because the way you presented, I got the impression that linked data systems, well, they give me the impression that it's just about the facts, and we work under the assumption they're all well-established facts. It doesn't really matter where they come from, because they're all somewhere in the cloud, and I just need to get them. And how do you address like sources and really verification of data? Can I always see in the end where does the information initially come from?
Yeah, provenance. That's the debate around that. They call it provenance, and the provenance is being stored in a linked data triple store, because it's a quad store actually. So the fourth part of my fact is about the provenance. which says, okay, this fact is from geonames. And then you have another graph which says it's from DBpedia, and this is from Geological Survey in Austria, and so on.
So in the end, I can go to the original document or website.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's another, okay, that's another debate. Yes, we have it with linked data. The nice ability to have the resource resolvable. It's really, if you type it in, the URI, where you click on the URI of the resource, it should go to the original one. You should not replace the original URI. That's one of the big no's in the linked data world. So you know exactly where it comes from, and that there is a provider which takes care of the quality or not. And if it's wrong, I can ask, hopefully, why do you think that, I don't know, Obama was born in 1950? Yeah.
My question would have been quite the same about the data quality, because I would be very reluctant to use data that is just taken from open sources, even if it's the European Union. They also publish wrong data.
Yeah, that cannot be resolved by linked data technologies, of course, but since linked data makes it more obvious, transparent, and visible because it's reused all over the places, of course, a lot of more feedback cycles start to come up. Then somebody says, "Hey, that's wrong. That's not. We reused your data, and it's not correct, to my opinion." So it of course increases data quality when being reused, when being published, and so on. And a lot of companies and enterprises have a fear of that their low data quality now becomes obvious. That's another story when we go to companies and say, look, open up your data silos to your colleagues in department B. They could reuse it. Then they say, no. Why? Why? Yeah, we have some problems with the metadata. We've started back in 1970. Now we've seen that really. At a large pharma company, they have 2 databases for their products. And it's like 2 kings. It's my database, and it's my database, and I don't work with your database. And we were not able to convince them on that level that it would be good for the users. I mean, technologically, it's not a big problem. They even reuse the same identifiers. But I don't want to have it connected in one place. So still, the product managers have to log in here, take a look, get some data, put it into Excel, log in here, get some data, put it into Excel, and put a unified view around the product. It's stupid, but it's like that. We call that, that's in Wien, in Vienna, we call it Schrebergarten-Mentalität. It's my garden. If you just enter 1 millimeter, gonna kick you out. Yeah, so I think that's a wiki problem in general.